And the first big thing I want to get to revolves around a team from the Big East, and that's St. John's. And St. John's is at an early crossroads. Now, on Saturday, the first, in my opinion, first conference Saturday of the 25-26 college basketball season, we had several blue blood programs lose. North Carolina, Kansas, who I'll get to later in the show, Kentucky, and UCLA as well. But no loss was as damaging in college basketball for a power conference team as St. John's lost to Providence at Madison Square Garden, and I'm going to tell you why now. Providence is a team that could very well turn around its season and finish at the top of the Big East, but right now where things look from a metrics perspective, Providence will equate to a quad 3 loss on St. John's resume. That is something that is going to follow the Red Storm around like a 5-pound dumbbell on its ankle from now until Selection Sunday. And given the fact that St. John's did not move the needle a great deal during its non-conference schedule in November and December, and given the fact that St. John's does not necessarily have a lot of major opportunities to be a team that's going to get a lot of quad 1 opportunities in Big East play, the urgency and the desperation now comes for the Red Storm during the first week of January. I know it's the first week of the calendar year. I know that we still have 9.5 weeks roughly until Selection Sunday, maybe a little bit more, closer to 10 weeks. But with that said, St. John's now has a pivotal week. The Red Storm are going to play Butler Tuesday at Hinkle Fieldhouse, and Saturday travel to Creighton. Both games are huge for St. John's, a program that came into this season with aspirations of building off last year, aspirations of building off a team that was a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament, aspirations of being in a situation where because it has a Hall of Fame coach in Rick Pitino, it could be a factor and a threat to play deep into the NCAA tournament. Right now, the biggest thing that St. John's needs to focus on is making the NCAA tournament. And the road to get there got a lot more difficult after Saturday's loss against Providence. Now, the head coach is still Rick Pitino. The head coach is somebody who has still been in a situation where he has taken teams that had less talent and had them overachieve. This has been much more challenging of a season than anybody anticipated for St. John's, including myself. And I will be honest, and I've said this to people about my own rationale. I looked at St. John's roster man for man, and the individual talent to me was and still is staggering. But with that said, a lot of the things that the team we saw a year ago, defensively, role allocation wise, and specifically at the point of attack with Kadari Richmond and Davon Smith, are nowhere near existent with this current basketball team. Role allocation remains an obvious work in progress, and that's directly correlated to point guard play. And another thing that I think you're really starting to see, the talent individually for St. John's is obviously staggering, but do the pieces necessarily fit together? That has been something that I think we're really starting to see. There are major issues defensively on the backboard. There are major issues, especially at the point of attack. And part of the reason why St. John's perimeter players struggled so badly against Providence on Saturday was because we have yet to see anybody on this roster emerge as a bona fide playmaker. Now, I was not the only person who was extremely high on St. John's prior to the season. They were ranked 5th, according to the AP poll, to start the year. But the bet that a lot of people made when they looked at St. John's roster, even if St. John's did not have a traditional point guard, even if St. John's was only bringing back, in terms of players of significance from last year, Zuby Ejiofor and Ruben Prey, people were betting on Rick Pitino. And 9 times out of 10 over the last 30 or 40 years, that has been a bet that makes a lot of sense to make. Rick Pitino is somebody, again, who has taken teams with less talent to unexpected heights. St. John's now is a team that is lacking chemistry, It is lacking role allocation. It is lacking a defensive tenacity that we saw a year ago. And most of all, it's lacking point guard play. The season is nowhere near over. But I will say this. We are a little less than 10 weeks away from Selection Sunday. St. John's has about as important a week as you can have in early January this week, with a road trip looming to Butler and a road trip looming to Creighton. And honestly, given the state of the Big East right now, St. John's needs to win both games. Now, I'll say this when it comes to the state of the St. John's resume. When you identify the fact that 3 Big East teams, UConn, Villanova, and Seton Hall, have pushed out from the rest of the league, if you are a fan of a team like St. John's, you want to be in a situation where those teams continue to win, because that is going to augment your ability and enhance your ability to have marquee opportunities. But I will still say this on January 5th, and I give full credit to Kevin Willard at Villanova and Shaheen Holloway at Seton Hall. But the only team that I have true confidence in to continue on the same path it is exuded so far this season, from now until Selection Sunday and go into March with a great resume among Big East teams, is UConn. We still don't know if Villanova is going to be able to sustain this. Villanova has done an incredible job of winning the games it's supposed to win and not taking any bad losses. The only losses Villanova has is to BYU and Michigan. But Villanova was also down 10 in the second half last week at home against DePaul. Seton Hall is having a dream season under Shaheen Holloway. Part of it is great evaluating. Part of it is great coaching. Part of it is divine intervention. As we saw Sunday against Creighton, when Najai Hines got that offensive rebound and went back up and scored the winning basket with less than a second to play. But are Villanova and Seton Hall going to be able to consistently go on the road and not take any bad losses? Are they going to be able to beat the DePauls, the Xaviers, the Marquettes when they play them consistently? Because the better they play, the more the opportunities are going to be for St. John's to move the needle. Because if Villanova and Seton Hall can keep their metrics right, that is 4 more opportunities for St. John's to have big wins, obviously, in addition to the 2 games against UConn. But make no mistake about it, the 9-5 start is a disappointment. The Providence loss was the biggest disappointment of all the losses that we saw in college basketball on Saturday. And now, on January the 5th, you can say without hesitation that an early crossroads exists for a team that many people, including myself, thought had a chance to be a top 16 protected seed on Selection Sunday and a high seed in the NCAA tournament. There's great talent on St. John's roster. There is not a great basketball team, at least not yet, and we haven't seen it. And the road to having a chance to play in the NCAA tournament starts this week, and it's a dangerous, dangerous road. St. John's has won the last 2 meetings against Butler at Hinkle Fieldhouse. It has also lost the last 2 meetings at Creighton, 2 on the last play, actually, under Rick Pitino. These are not going to be easy places to play. Butler has played good basketball this year under Thad Matta, has a win on its resume over Virginia. Creighton, up until yesterday's loss at Seton Hall with the second left, had won 4 games in a row. It's a pivotal week for Rick Pitino and St. John's, a week that ultimately you can say will define the Red Storm season. Because at 9-5, 2 road wins give obviously a boost to your resume and get you a little bit above sea level. And coming up next for St. John's, these are your next 4. At Butler, at Creighton, home against the struggling Marquette team, and then a road trip to Villanova. But make no mistake about it, the loss to Providence is not going away unless the Friars somehow recalibrate their season. And I'm not saying that's impossible because Providence has talent in the backcourt. But unless the Friars do that, that loss, a quad 3 defeat to Providence, will follow St. John's around, again, like a 5-pound dumbbell around its ankle from now until Selection Sunday.